Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is our second Work on Climate Success Stories Spotlight event. And I am very pleased to welcome Eva and Greg, who will be sharing their stories with us. My name is Utkarsh Vaidya. I am the events lead for the Work on Climate community. And I just want to thank again our panelists for joining us today. And we have a few questions lined up for them. We'll just talk about their journey and their experiences in finding work in climate or climate tech so far. And then if anyone in the audience has questions, feel free to either DM me or just raise your hand and I will ask you to unmute yourself and ask the question yourself. So why don't we get started and just do some quick introductions. Eva, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sounds good. Hi, everyone. So my name is Eva, and I am the co-founder of Work on Climate. In my day job, I'm a lead product designer at Inspire Clean Energy. And I have about almost 10 years of experience on the tech industry and recently transitioned to climate industry for about a year and a half now. I am also from Spain. And right now I'm currently located in South California, where I live with my husband and two kids.
Awesome. Hey everyone, I'm Greg. Actually, we have really fascinating parallel background. So I also have about 10 years in tech. I was a consultant by trade to start, and then went to business school and have been in tech since then. And just about a month now in climate and sustainability. This journey that you all are on was a big part of my last 12 months or so, as I realized it was something I really wanted to do. And now at a company called Novi that I'll talk a little bit more about as we get into it. I'm also in Southern California in Los Angeles, and also live with my spouse, wife, and two kids. So there you go.
Great. Well, thank you again for joining us. And why don't we dive right into it? I guess the first question, the most obvious question is, how are you working on climate in your current role?
Yeah, and I can go first. So on my current role, at Inspire Clean Energy, I focus on creating a digital experience. I'm a product designer, so people can access or switch their home electricity consumption to clean energy, and they will be also able to find other ways to reduce their carbon footprint. Inspire Clean Energy is a B Corp. So, one of the missions that we have, is transform the way people access clean energy. But in addition to that, we do also have other partnership with other organizations. So as an example, Pachama or Give Power, so people can increase their positive impact on the environment. Yeah.
Great. So I work at, as I mentioned, a company called Novi, and Novi is a data-driven B2B marketplace for sustainable, now currently mostly beauty and personal care products. And so the goal and sort of problem we're solving, our founder, Kimberly, had started a sustainable beauty brand a number of years ago. And because of the opaqueness and sort of power dynamics in the supply chain, she talks about how she still actually doesn't know what specific trade materials are in the first product that they launched, because of the way that they have to work through third-party manufacturers as an upstart brand. And so she spun off this company Novi to solve that problem and really empower brands who are trying to build more sustainable, transparent products to have the data, to have the direct access to supplies, and sustainable packaging, and the data to really understand which of these ingredients or packaging components meet all the different certifications. It's a very complex world out there, as many of you might know, that's changing quickly. And so as these indie brands trying to do the right thing for the planet, meet consumer demands, it's very challenging to actually do that, surprisingly so, as someone new to that space. So that's really the core problem that we're trying to solve. My role there, I lead our go-to-market team, so kind of all customer-facing partnerships, sales, marketing, and support, as well as strategy, and which is really a nascent function for us, but trying to get really tight on how we approach what is a very complex market to bring our vision to fruition.
Yeah, I think that that makes sense. So just curious, what first prompted you to get into climate work? Was it something that you always sort of envisioned for yourself professionally, or is it something that has crystallized for you recently?
For me, it was very recent. It was early over the last like 9 months or so since last summer. I've always cared a lot about climate. I've always paid a lot of attention to our climate crisis. Frankly, my background and talk a lot about roles that I've been in over the last sort of in tech. My background's in software largely. I'm more of like a business generalist, so I've done like strategy, marketing, partnerships, and my impression was that a lot of the work to be done in climate was like the deep tech, really like technological innovation work. And so I had never seriously considered it. And I had started a job search kind of in the fall around September timeframe. And I spoke to an ex-colleague of mine who has a very similar profile, and he was telling me that he had actually just signed on to be like a chief business officer of a food tech company, who was they are now I'm gonna forget. I forget exactly what they're doing, but it's like a a non-dairy product in food tech, and was sort of sharing some of his search, and that was a bit of a light bulb moment for me of like, oh wow, if this guy Avnish is his name, if Avnish could do this, like I could do this, because we have a very similar background and skill set, and that kind of set off my mind. And as I took a step back, like I became really compelled to, I see like probably many of you feel as well, really compelled to dedicate a lot of my personal and professional energies to this fight that we're all in. And that conversation and a lot of the learnings I've had since then really built that conviction that I can go do it. And obviously finding the right spot, which we can talk more about too, is can be a long process and can be a challenge, but that was the combination of things for me that built my conviction and confidence that this is the move I wanted to make.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. On my case, when I was working a few years back at Microsoft, I just kind of like had the call. I always have been really connected to the nature, and when I, in my childhood, we spent summers on a camping site, so we were always wandering, always playing, and always close to nature. And these latest events with weather fluctuations and things that we have been seeing, it was kind of that moment where, okay, we have the technology at the company that I'm working on. They also spend a lot of resources on doing, they call it like hack for good, or putting hackathons together, so you can spend not only time, so for you to not spend time when you're working, but basically when you have time to do something for good, for other purposes. So in one of those, we talked about doing something, but then for the time commitment and things didn't work out. And then years later, actually like almost 2 years now, a year ago now, is when I saw the opportunity, when I saw Eugene's post at LinkedIn. It was at the beginning of the days where it was going a little bit viral. And then I just read it, and then had that, trigger in myself, like I just cannot do any more seconds, do not doing something for this purpose. And I want to focus all my skills and expertise into this topic. So I just reached out to him in a private message. And then from there, we were having a few meetings to talk about what are the things that we can do. We were wanting to do apps, or we were wanting to do other type of technology that will help to move the needle. And we actually decided to create a community, because it's something that this is a massive issue, and sometimes it's so hard to grasp your heads around it, or how to even start. So we wanted to solve those issues first, and the psychological barriers that you have when prompting something big as solving climate. And we thought that by having a place where people can connect, can express, can talk about it, can exchange ideas, and can have a sense of belonging, and a resourceful of opportunities of things to reach out to do, it would be the best thing. So that's why we decided to create a Slack community, and then build programs on top of it to help depending on the needs of the members, of the things that we will discover through research or things like that. So that's where we decided to do that, and then here we are.
Yeah, so quick follow-up on that, Eva. When you
Yeah.
first kind of envisioned this idea of this community to help folks transition into climate work, compared to like how active the community is today, or like the level of success that it's had in sort of tapping into this latent desire of folks to work in climate, did you envision this level of response or success? So what surprised you, and perhaps what didn't surprise you about like where we are today?
Yeah. So something that we knew since the beginning is like we wanted to create something that's scalable. So we know that at some point it will reach, a big amount of people, and it will have hopefully a big amount of impact. But I guess that how active the community is something that has been a little bit more impressive, because it's like something that we were thinking was that maybe this Slack community is something that you join and then you find your journey, and then eventually you like graduate it because you find your opportunity, you find your path, and then you can just go and have the impact that you want to have on Earth. And the beginning of the conversation was more related to that, like a path through your journey. But then we seen that people like to stick around and then have conversations and then following up. And even though you find a job, maybe you want to create something with someone else on the side, or so there is not a need to to graduate from it. Is something that maybe will stay with you forever. So that was something that is like inspiring and rewarding, because it's like not only we are solving this amount of the journey, is something that people are getting benefit from perhaps their lifetime. So that is something that is amazing to see and to watch.
That's really cool. One of the things that stood out to me, even in like just so I've only been in my full-time role for about a month, but like even in kind of my live professional setting, like the degree of kind of mission alignment across the ecosystem. And like, it's the first role I've ever been in where, we meet with partners and we describe our vision. Like they're like, yes, like anything we can do to help you, even not even from like a business relationship standpoint, but just like whatever we can do to like help the whole industry move that direction, like let us know. And so I think of kind of work on climate that way too, is like, yes, I've found a role, but it's a community of folks that are like very mission aligned. And so that makes it really sort of interesting and engaging to me, kind of as we continue from here, right? Like, and as we all kind of take on these different business objectives. And so it's been really cool to see. Sometimes I just spend time just like reading the introductions of like all the different types of people that are coming into the space, and that itself is pretty inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah, I think what you mentioned just now around this mission alignment within the community that kind of unites the community, it feels very collaborative. I had a question that's sort of related to that. So in your opinion, why is right now a good time to work on this problem, on this broader issue of climate change or, mitigation?
Yeah, I've got a snarky answer and then a less snarky answer. My snarky answer is like, this isn't getting any less urgent of a problem, right? It's like, if we're gonna help the planet stay healthy and like do all solve the problem, like now is the time, right? Like the longer we wait, the harder it gets. But I think like on the flip side, the less snarky answer is, even from like a career opportunity standpoint too, like there is just a role for everyone to play, right? There is a ton of investment in this space, and I say this space like climate tech broadly, which is like very vast and intimidating, which we can talk about as well. But there is so much investment. There's so much of a migration, like of talented people into this space. Like the growth opportunities are there, the financial opportunities are there, and then you get to do it all while like having a huge impact on the world as well. So I think it's just an awesome combination. And yeah, Eva, I'm curious on your perspective. I even think like the growth you've seen with work on climate is a great example of that, of just like how many people want to work in this space, and how many different kinds of opportunities there are to do that and have impact.
Yeah, I am on the same boat. I think that it is rather something that we do now, or will be too late, which maybe is already too late, but that's okay. Maybe we can try to create some solutions that will have a massive impact that we were expecting, and then we can retract that. But yeah, in the long term of the investment, like I think that thankfully now is on almost the center of every conversation, which is awesome because it gives visibility, it gives credibility, and then investors are starting to fund large amount of money into the solutions, so we can have more resources. And there is also this sense of urgency, and the sad part of it is because it's like all the weather alterations that we're seeing around us. So it's something that you can feel, and it's something that is there, and then you see yourself. So it's not something that you need to believe. And I think that that is also like putting some pressure or higher pressure to do something about it. And it's something that is not something that you can do yourself. So it's something that we need to do together. That's why it's like, for me, it was so important to have this massive community that can push everywhere that we can, but it's something that needs to go, like it needs to be like at a scale, but even with your own contributions will help. And I think that is a perfect moment now, because all of the reasons that we mentioned, and even more, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very insightful. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. Going back to a couple of things that you mentioned earlier throughout our conversation, I just wanted to ask you, now that you are on the other side of the transition, especially coming from like an engineering background, kind of like a generalist engineering background as well, and then Eva, for you, from a design background, I've often encountered folks from both of these domains who are unsure how their skills would actually apply. Like they can't seem to like think about, or they can't seem to wrap their head around like how they might be able to apply their skills in a general way, you know, to these problems. Are there any misconceptions that you would like to clear around the application of your skills or your domain to climate?
Yeah, I can go first. Yes, I think that something's crucial to me is like, we need to be aware of our psychological barriers that we have, and then identifying them, and then put a plan in place to overcome them. Like, as an example, we might not know how our skills will transition to climate industry, and my answer to people who mention that, or even myself, is that I just realized that your skills will apply to any industry. It's just a matter of learning, and learning a lot, especially about the new sector that you're going to get into, or the problems that you might need to be solving, and then just push through it. And you need to be somehow comfortable with the unknown for a little while, and just use your resources and ask a lot of questions, and, you know, get as much help as you can, and think about like many other people went through the same thing, and then remember yourself when the first time that you were having a job, the first job that you got, like it is the same, but it's different topics, different industries, and different things that you might need to learn now. I guess that, you know, sometimes those big transitions happen far in time, so we forget about how was the stages that you went through, but it's basically the same, and then you can do it. And, you know, and there is an opportunity for you. It's like sometimes harder than other times to find, but I want to send you courage, and just do it.
I think that's spot on. For me, there's like a couple layers of this. So one is, I think there's a role for everyone. Like I think climate and climate tech in general is like a little bit of an artificial term, in the sense that like it describes like a set of industries that are kind of at a focal point, that are like have been growing, but like all sorts of industries and companies and like are starting to move in this direction, like making net zero commitments, and like need to transform, like really the whole world has to transform how we like do business and engage with each other. And so like I had a sort of an ex-classmate that who used to work in solar, and she gave me a piece of advice that really stuck with me, which is like, don't think too hard about like what counts as climate, or like where the large impact is going to be. Like this all needs to, like we have to do all of it. And so especially when you're getting in, like I'd encourage you, and this is the approach I took, to find the type of work that is like related, and that's helping move the world forward in this way that most closely aligns with your skill set. And so for me, like that was my background's in software. I did do a lot of research on sort of the more like hard tech, like energy innovation. And for me, like that was too big of a step for the first opportunity in this space. Like I felt like that was going to be really challenging. And so what I looked for is where are there software, and somebody's like software marketplace platform is my background. And so what I looked for is like, where are there data platforms, marketplaces that actually can have like really high leverage roles in accelerating transition and making markets. And there weren't a ton, quite honestly. It's not my list of target companies didn't end up being super long, but they were all like potentially really compelling fits, and one of them was Novi, and so it worked out. And so I'd like encourage you to I guess not think too hard, right? Like find something that there is a good analogy for your skill set where you feel like you're doing something that's really impactful, and don't feel like you need to optimize like every single piece of it to like get into the right position, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So on that note, I did want to kind of get into your opportunity finding process itself. You know, I know there are a lot of folks on this call, and then a lot of folks who will view this recording later as well, who are in the middle of that process, right, to try and find opportunities. So I was just wondering, like, what did your job hunting process look like? And firstly, were you looking exclusively at climate oriented work, or you know, that was a subset of what you were looking at? And then just more broadly, like, what did that process look like for you, going from general research to like actually applying and going through the funnel?
I'm happy to start since I just sort of started talking about this. So for me, I decided I wanted to job search first, and I like did the work to step back and figure out. When I did the work to step back and figure out what I wanted, it became pretty clear that I felt really compelled to work in climate or sustainability, and so my search was totally focused there. It is a really vast, intimidating space as someone that hasn't spent time here before, and so like for what I tried to do is take you know, an hour a day and either like have a coffee chat type conversation with someone or just read like the Bill Gates book, How to Avoid Climate Catastrophe was really like helpful framing. John Doerr's new book around like speed and scale was really helpful for me. And just try to like create kind of a mental mind map of like what are all the different types of opportunities and the work that needs to be done, and then kind of go deeper into each one. And sometimes it was like with energy, this was like I was saying, like with energy pretty quickly I was like, oh, this is clearly like a huge part of the solution, but I'm not like really seeing how my skill sets apply here a lot of the time, and like it was hard to get excited about, and so I kind of moved on. Whereas areas like food tech and like and sort of the consumer sustainability lanes, like those started to feel like areas that were potentially better fit for me. And so then I would go deeper into those areas and like talk to people and do research and try to find companies. I spent a lot of time reading like newsletters and just browsing like venture portfolios online to understand what was out there. Work on climate base, my climate journey a little bit. There was one, Climate Tech VC was like very helpful, kind of mind maps and industry maps as well, just to try to like really identify like sub segments I thought that could be really compelling and where I thought like my skills could be a fit, and then those target companies. And then I had, you know, you have to figure out like what you're personally optimizing for too. And so for me, I started with companies where I had a personal connection and I felt like I'd be coming in with some trust. And so there were like a handful on that list. And then just like other ones that were interesting would do like cold outreach, and see, and sometimes it was successful, sometimes not. I think the cold outreach and informational interviewing can feel very discouraging. Like it can take a long time. And all you're really trying to do is like put yourself in a lot of consideration set so that when they do think like have a role, you're on the top of their list. And so it's like a very nonlinear process. I was kind of lucky because ultimately Novi was the founder and I have worked together in a prior role, and so that was one of the places where I had a personal connection, and so we were like I actually started advising there pretty quickly, and then as we got into the advisor work, it became something more full-time. But I think that kind of model is I've used it a few times throughout my career, and I think it can be really effective here as well.
Yeah, and in my case it was a little bit different. I was way more tactical, especially because I set to myself some time frame. Like sometimes when you want to do this type of transition, and there is a lot of unknowns that you have, you know, inside. It could take either weeks or it could take years. So I didn't want to get into that transition where and applying and investigating and doing all of those things. So for me, it happened to be that it was a transition that I took like 3 months. And then something that I wanted to do was in the first 2 months, I wanted to focus to find a job only at climate tech. And then if that didn't happen, I needed it to expand my scope and come back to tech industry, or to consider tech industry in case that was easier, because we have, a lot of bills to pay and, a life to continue to be in the same level, or, hopefully better. But then to me, it was just like that. I have a hard, or I wanted it to set a harder deadline for me. So what I did was more about like putting all of the things in places that automatically are going to help me to get to those resources. As an example, I went to services that you'll be able to save your search, your job search with the criteria that you wanted, and then they will send you emails with those criteria. And then daily, I'll have a list of multiple services that match my criteria, and then I will be reading through them, investigating a little bit more about the companies and the culture, and then just doing some research on the one that spikes some of my interest. And the reason that I would say that is because when I was doing that, I realized that I needed to think about like, what is my criteria? And therefore pushed me to think about like, what are the values that I wanted to find on the next role. And as an example, in my case, it's like 2 buckets, like one into the feeling an atmosphere that is more related to, I wanted it to have freedom, have a place where I feel that people like have love for things that they do, for being between each other, and empathy. And then a solution or a company that is building something that is impactful, but also scalable. So the impact could be like even bigger. And I knew that because the role that I'm in, like the solutions that I will be taking and this impactful thing on a scalable thing, it will be like, I will be able to even push it further. So all of those challenges and all of the responsibility and things that will come after will be a given. And that is where I feel motivated, because I see the challenge and I see how I can overcome it. And then I can, take more responsibility over time and things like that. So I see the projection of the company. But because it was impactful and scalable, it will ensure me that then that will come after. So with those things in mind, I just said that I set up a few things. I have conversations about it because we were founding the community. I will also have networking with people, especially on the introduction channel. I see that maybe the CEO will join of the company that I was looking for, or that I saw something about related to that. And then I will reach out in the direct message, and then we'll have a conversation about it. Or, maybe people who say that they have a job in the company, I will reach out and then I'll test the culture to see how was the culture there, to see if it will be like landing with my values or not. And then, and then just reaching out also, or applying without knowing anyone at the company. Sometimes we know that those things will affect the likelihood for you to get the job or to pass to the next interview. But, it's something that you also need to do. So basically, I also documented a ton of the process, and I use OneNote just because I was working on Microsoft, but any documentation tool that you have that will make your life easier as well. Like I will do that because you are going to be applying to a lot of jobs and I don't want to read repetitive tasks. So I document all of it, even responses, like I'm going to, and then, work around it. Or, the cover letter is something that you need to be prepared. Like I didn't have it prepared because it was a long time since I was not looking for a job. So a lot of times also getting invested into trying to make your life easier when you're going to go through many, many rounds of interviews as well, and be prepared for the rejections, which sometimes it hurts a little bit, but that's okay. You'll find the one that is for you, just keep pushing. But many, 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 many no's will go your way. And especially with those which I didn't know, ATTS or TTS, like the technology that will scan your resume. If it's at a PDF, will work worse than if it's in a Word document, and then you'll get a number, and then that will go a rank against all of the other candidates, which I didn't know. And that process for me is like, there is no love into it. It's just a machine trying to understand a PDF image of your resume and rank you against something else. So, that's why I focus more on the networking and things like that. But then eventually you need to go through that as well. So trying to learn the tricks as well, how it really works, and then trying to get the best that I can on those processes.
Yeah, again, thank you for all of that advice. I think it's quite insightful. If anyone has questions from the audience, feel free to raise your hand and I'll call on you to unmute yourself, or just send it over chat and I can read it out as well. In the meantime, I do have a follow-up for you, for the two of you, which is, how did your educational background or professional experience leading up to this transition to climate influence your approach toward how you want to apply yourself to climate?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eve.
No. I was gonna say.
I think for me it was kind of what I mentioned around like, where did I feel like I can add the most value. So like, I think to reemphasize one of the earlier points, like there's a role for everyone in like this challenge. We have like, there's so much work to be done, and I think the challenge is finding where where you fit, right? Like what is that next role for you? And so for me, that was like, I'm in like a relatively senior position. I wanted to, be in a relatively senior position. And so I, because of that, like felt it was really important that I could bring a lot of like prior experience and values. And I felt, based on the fact that I'd worked for like SaaS marketplace platform companies in the past, like that's really where my skill set applied. And that heavily informed my search, since that is, as I mentioned, I think a minority of like what we'd call climate tech companies out there. And that was probably the biggest thing. I also think, I guess that was probably the biggest thing for me. And then just knowing like what role you want, and to Eva's point, like you're playing a volume game in many ways. Like you're gonna have to probably apply or talk to like many companies to find the place that like needs you, right? And that's like, it is a volume game. But I think from my background, having like a really clear picture of what is the type of role that I wanted was a really important input, because it makes it clearer like where there's not a fit. And there were really great companies where like, even where I had like strong connections, and where I would be like super excited to help that mission, where it was just like the thing that they were looking for was not what I wanted. And so like we could have one conversation and go on our separate ways. And I think that clarity is really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And related to the background, so I am a true believer that you don't need to have all of the specs that they ask in the job interview or in the job description. And no matter what you have, you can, like, you have been using it in a way that you might not even realizing. So it's just the beauty of know how to sell it, not to sell it, but like to know how to explain to someone how you have been using those skills or those capabilities that the background give you. So in my example, I was studying to being a building engineer, and then you say, okay, that has nothing to do with design, but in reality it puts you some things that you will not maybe be exposed to. As an example, risk management, or having consideration many parameters, or applying the appropriate foundation, because otherwise the building is going to fall. So it's like all of those things is something that it will help you, no matter what is your background, on being applied in a way for the new role that you might want to apply. So use those mental models to explain how you will be making an impact, no matter what it is. And then thankfully, because I did the design, that helped me to think about like how I'm going to be approaching to solve a problem. And lately I had been focusing heavily on being more empathetic, that we think that we are empathetic, but sometimes you don't. So it's like, how do you gain empathy with the business, with the user, with the technology, or the feasibility, the climate, like everything you need to be aware of. And that has been huge. And it was a skill that I got from studying design. But then, iterations, like how are we going to be able to iterate those things and things like that. So I guess that no matter what is the background that you have, you are always learning things that you can apply to the next job that you're going to get into.
Great. Yeah. Looks like Brett has a question for you folks. Brett, go ahead.
Okay, sure. Hey, folks. So far, so great. So far, so good. I really appreciate the panel here. So I'm currently in a similar journey, but only a few months in. Like 2 decades worth of digital experience, technology leadership, and looking to transition. And I think, Greg, to your point, I wanted to make a change in my career to work a little bit more directly towards climate change. And so, in my mind, more to Eva's sort of journey, I'm going to try to be a little bit more focused with how I want to make that commitment. Here's my question. So I feel that even though I'm only a few months in, I'm finding it hard to get through to companies. I get that it's a volume game, and I get that I'm having to build my network almost from scratch in this new area. But where do you think is the first place that, say, a job screener looks? Is it LinkedIn? Is it the CV? Is it the experience list? Second question: the second part of that question, how do you really come forward with your intention? If you have no experience in the space in climate, how do you come forward with I'm new to the space, I want to help out? And how do you make yourself sound like valuable even though you don't have this experience?
Yeah, those are really good questions. So what I hear you saying is like, what is the first place to look for jobs, right? And then for me, LinkedIn was not one of them. I try and it failed for me because the search capability, like at Microsoft, I was working on search. So for me, search is like so big and it could be so more and powerful. And LinkedIn lacks on how you are able to search the criteria, how, like annotations on companies when they are building their profiles are not attached to it. So when I was looking for sustainability, maybe I will get something that are not related to what I was looking for. I didn't even know what was the term that I needed it to search for, to be honest, sometimes. So LinkedIn for me was not super, super helpful. I don't remember how, but I guess that on the internet or maybe a blog post that someone created a few months back or years back. And thanks to the community work on climate, I started learning those services that are specifically related for climate job, as an example, climate based. So I will go there, create my criteria, and then I said before, like I will just get emails like with all of those jobs that has been posted. And the good about it is like you will get notified every time that there is a new job open for that position. So you will be one of the few first candidates applying to the job. Sometimes it's more than that, which is okay. Like maybe they have not found anyone, so it's a good second round, good for you to get into the loop. But I will do things like that. Angel list was also so good for me because the startups are there, and usually companies at solving climate and doing things for climate usually are the startups. Is not as common to see big companies doing. Now is the trend, but then 2 years ago it was not. So as an example, Google has a sustainability team, Microsoft as well, Amazon, and all of those. But before it was not as easy to find, and now they have been working on making sure that people know how to get on big companies roles for sustainable and climate and things like that. So I would do that, like go to websites that serve jobs and then create notifications for my email.
I guess, but to the other part of your questions in terms of like what do hiring managers look at? Like, I think for and again, this is one man's opinion, given I'm sure hiring managers are all a little bit different. For me, it's the resume and LinkedIn are both helpful. What I'm trying to look for is like rare is the person that has like exactly all the types of experience you want, right? And so you're trying to like assess, do you have the skills and like sort of real like analogous experiences in prior roles, even if those prior roles looked very different or like in more different space. So for me, like it's hard to get that anywhere but a resume. Obviously LinkedIn then helps, like, do we have mutual connections? Is there someone I can like ask about you? Like all those things matter too. I'd also say, like, to get your foot in the door, like the networking is invaluable, and I'd say use the like these types of communities, right? Like I mean, candidly, I'm more likely to like take a conversation with someone through that like slacks me through Work on Climate that maybe they don't have like the perfect background, but I can kind of squint and see how like they might fit down the road, versus like if someone just like cold drops a resume that isn't a good fit for what I'm looking for, like they're just going to get like a canned message and that'll be the end of it. And so I do think that like that networking, even if it's like pretty cold outreach, like through these communities, is useful. And then my last point around like as you're transitioning to a new space, again, I think like it kind of, to me, the approach I've taken is like the goal with any new job is to like minimize the distance between like what you are and what you bring and like what the job is looking for, right? Like that you want to close that gap as much as possible. And I found like the most rewarding experiences for me in my career were like where I like already knew how to do 2/3 of the job really well, but the extra third of the job, like I have no idea what I'm doing, but that's like a good, it was like very complementary with like what the rest of the team is or the other folks that I'm working with. And so I think about as you're reaching out to these companies, like as you know, as you see what kind of role they're looking for, as you understand the space a little bit better, and how do you like position yourself in a way that minimizes that distance? I think that's really important. And then to the volume game piece, like it may be that you show experience in 2/3 of the requirements on a whole bunch of different companies, but like the thing that you need to learn is a better complement to the team in like 2 of the 10 places you reach out to. And so they're willing to have a conversation with you. So some of it's volume, but I think the more you can close that distance, and to me, that's largely through resume, that's through like networking, coffee chats, because like somebody will have a conversation with you where you can explain and kind of talk through a lot of that stuff. Those have been like the most powerful levers.
Yeah, and to addition to that, I will say that you gotta study where you're getting into. As an example, is like if I am interested in one of the companies, you get lines that they have, how do they map with previous experiences that you have, so you can tease out that you have been working on something similar but related to this problem, and how much you impacted the business on your previous role and things like that. So kind of like spend the time to get to know them really. So I will go to the profiles on LinkedIn, I will see their experience, and then I will bring something up like, oh, and then you also work on this. Oh yeah. So then that icebreakers that are not really an icebreakers also let them know that you have interest and intent, and then you can map out to your previous experience to something that you will be working, trying to close the gap, as you were saying, like this, that was on the spot, like, yeah, you gotta try to fit into their need. So you need to be able to understand what is actually their need as well.
Yeah, I love that, Claude. And then the other thing I'd add to pile onto that is where there's these moments in time for companies where things are changing. So like oftentimes it's a fundraising round, sometimes it's a product launch. Like those are great moments to seize onto, even with cold outreach, because they show you're interested in your tracking, and 2, like there is change happening there, right? And so they're thinking about how do they support that. And there's one company that I was really interested in that I like didn't reach out for like 3 months as I was starting my journey, because I was like, I can't articulate how I fit here right now. And then I saw that they launched a new product that was like a data platform, and I was like, oh, I'm going to reach out right now because that's like exactly what I'm good at. And we had like and it wasn't ultimately like a fit, but like we had 2 great conversations, and that I couldn't have had like a week before they launched that product. So I think tracking those things can also be really impactful too.
Yeah, and the way to do so that I used was like, and LinkedIn was helpful for that. So you can follow a company, and then every post that is like it will get on your feed. So that was a good usage of LinkedIn for me.
Does that answer your question, Brett? Any follow-ups?
No, that was fantastic. Thank you both.
Yeah, so a small bit of advice I'll share as well. Both being a job searcher as well as a hiring manager in my previous job. Well, and this might be a bit more general than Brett, what you're specifically looking for, but going back to something Eva said around organizing all of the material that you put together, I found it very useful, especially as someone that's broadly searching for climate work, not very like specifically searching within subdomains. I think every time I research like a specific domain like energy or oceans or, agroforestry or regen agro, whatever it might be, just spending some time to think about which parts of my experience and education are generalizable and applicable to that domain, and just articulating that argument really helps, because I can always draw from that when I'm like putting together this communication, and it just reduces like the cognitive load of coming up with like a new narrative every single time. And often I find that like these points, right, or like these arguments, they tend to cross industries as well, right? Especially when I'm talking about like dealing with data, or my experience with like managing SaaS products or dealing with customers, things like this, they very often apply to like all of these opportunities. And so just having a few of like these canned bits of like writing really helps me. And then I kind of like have this big Frankenstein thing that's a master template, and then I just kind of like chop and change it to make something that looks polished with much less effort. And it took me a long time to kind of create that template as well, so it's always a work in progress. But yeah, it's something that I found really helpful. So just thought I would share. Neil had a question on the line as well. Neil, want to go ahead and ask it?
Yeah, thank you. And this is really, really helpful. This sort of tags onto some of the conversation we just had too. But like, what are some of the pointed questions that you ask to folks that are working in the space to try to assess, what you're like, if you want to work in that space, what your role is can add value to that space. Love to get some like key examples of questions.
I was not able to find my mute button. So let's see. I am a very organized person. So I'm going to describe a little bit about what I do. So maybe it will help you, but maybe you don't need to go that far. But basically, because I know like the type of round of interviews, like usually is with a person that is the on the people's teams. So they are basically hiring for that position, or helping source candidates for that position, and then the hiring manager. And then you get some sort of like technical, depending on your role, you might know what are the few different roles of people that are going to be interviewing you. So what I do is like, I do have a set of questions for those specific people. And as an example, when you get to talk to the CEO, you might want to have a different set of questions that you will ask to the hiring manager. So I do those things, and then I document those things while I'm going through it. The first few ones were a failure and they were a little bit harder, but then you can find them on blogs. What I did was like, I searched for blog for what are the common questions to ask a hiring manager, what are the questions to ask. So then I will pick and choose and modify them as we were talking about, like, but you have a set, so they will never got you on blank, because you have a script that you can go through it. And then depending on where you're looking for, or the question that you have, or how the conversation is going, you'll flow through it. But it's always good to have a set of questions. And with the manager, it will be about like the growth on your role, or the responsibility, or the type of job. And then with the stakeholders, as an example for me, will be engineering. If I have a technical interview with an engineer, I will ask about like, okay, how the decisions are made, or what are the tech that we have, that I need to have in consideration, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to build solutions for customers, maybe because we can't. So all of those things that they know that you're in tune with the person that you are speaking to is always helpful.
I also heard, in your question, like a bit of what do you, when you're learning about the space, what do you ask? Was that part of it as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So like for that, I guess, so I'm trying to remember what my scripts were for these. I love talking to investors, I guess, as a start. This is not exactly an answer to your question, but I think it's so helpful, like especially early stage investors, like seed stage, like Series A, because they understand like the landscape of what's out there so well, and like they've got large portfolios by design, and so it was super helpful just like in talking to a few investors and describing like, here's what I'm looking for, and asking questions like, what types of how are you trying to shift your investments, or like how do you evaluate these companies, right? Like I learned some really interesting things about what makes like for a more likely successful early stage company, since that was new for me, and that was really helpful. For folks that have, conversations like this, whether it's one-on-one or in panels, like understanding how people made decisions, like how they researched the space. A lot of my conversations were just like trying to understand, again, like a mental map of what was out there. And so like, asking how they kind of conceptualize their ecosystem, right, of the company they work for. Those were the kinds of things that I really dug into and were helpful. And then obviously people that have worked in like specific kinds of roles. And so for a while, because of the breadth of the challenge, I was like sort of exploring going into venture, and I was like, oh, maybe I can like make a high level of impact by going into venture. And I talked to some people in venture about like what they do every day, and they're like, I was like, that's not what I want to be doing, just me personally. So venture is great. I love a lot of venture people, but not what I wanted to be doing. And so like it's helpful to just like talk to the people that are in the jobs that you think you might want to have, and test whether you are excited about what they do every day. I'd also, sorry, one more, I know it's a little long-winded. One more thing that's helpful on that front, which is I always like, I would say take recruiting calls is the other thing. Like I found, and I've never ever taken a job through like reactive taking recruiting calls, but they've been super helpful in figuring out like what I actually get excited about, because you like have these conversations and they explain the job. And sometimes I'm like surprised by how intrigued I am. And sometimes I'm like, this conversation can be over 5 minutes. Like, I don't really care what you're talking about. And that's like really helpful data for you as you're like trying to map the world and figure out how you fit in.
Thank you both. Really helpful.
Any other questions from the audience? Great. Well, I just have one question. So kind of turning the tables, is there anything that the broader climate community can do for you, Eva and Greg, in your current roles or for your companies to help you in any way?
Yeah, that's a good question. In my case, something that you guys can do for me, we have open positions. So maybe that is something that you might be interested. So we are hiring at my current job, Inspire Clean Energy. We have different roles, like we have from needs on people's team related to culture and engagement, and also related to finance, sales, pricing mechanism. We also need software engineers. We also need data engineers and product managers, designers. So you can go there and see if someone see fit. And then if you ever thought about like clean energy, at least, it's not an open door that you didn't even know that it existed. We have like, there's many competitors. So if it's something that you would like to do, you can go and explore that route. And additionally, on work on climate, we are also need for help from volunteers. So if you want to get more involved into the space, or you would like to give back because it has been helpful, or if you just want to spend some time helping others or scaling this community, you can also reach out. We need experts for some programs on the office hours programs. We are looking for research, we are looking for designers, we are looking for technical people that can help us with the Slack and also with automation and code that we need to implement, or just we need more people. We are scaling so fast, so you also would like to volunteer some of the time, feel free to reach out in the community, and that will be helpful. So there are the two tactical things that right now I can think about that you will help us.
Cool. And on my front, I mean, really, hiring is the big one. We're a lot smaller than Inspire. Inspire is, by the way, a super cool company. I actually interviewed there like 2 years ago. It's a great spot. So so Novi is about 30 people. We're like very early. We've raised a Series B, but we're like more like a Series A stage company. We're pre-product market fit in like the core product that we really want to build out, which is the marketplace. So it's a kind of a different set of challenges. We're hiring 5 different types of roles right now. So software engineers, a founding product designer. So it'd be like the first product design person on the team, which is pretty exciting. And then I am specifically hiring like the people that will be like the 3 most senior members of my team, which is a head of business development, specifically like strategic partnerships, not sales, a head of biz ops. That's like that pipeline's a little bit farther along, but if you're interested, let's talk. And then it had what's been actually the hardest one to find so far, which is a director of demand generation and top of funnel marketing. And that's someone that will own like our entire marketing funnel through acquisition. And we think we have a really large content and SEO opportunity if that's something that you all know anything about, or if you know people that sounds interesting too. And then the other thing is just if you happen to work in this space or know people in the space, as I mentioned, the value chain, the ecosystem in beauty and personal care is super complex. We're like always like looking to grow our partnerships and our the way we help like accelerate transformation for the whole industry. And so if you know or work at like other people that are potential partners, I'd love to talk to you as well.
Great. Well, we are just about approaching the top of the hour. So I want to thank you again for spending an afternoon with us today. And I want to thank you on behalf of the audience as well for all of your insightful advice. Have a great rest of the day, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.